Ethan Reed trusted two people more than anyone in the world, his wife Laura and his best friend Darren. But after 3 years working overseas to build a better future for them all, he returned home to uncover a chilling truth. The two people he loved most had built a secret life behind his back. What started as suspicion soon spiraled into a shocking web of betrayal, blackmail, and lies that would tear apart everything he thought he knew. Ethan Reed had always believed in building a life through loyalty, hard work, and love. At 34, he had managed to carve out a comfortable life in the quiet suburbs of Dayton, Ohio. He wasn't wealthy, but he had everything he needed: a steady job as a civil engineer, a cozy 3-bedroom home, and a marriage that to him felt solid and dependable. His wife Laura was a high school English teacher, a kind and thoughtful woman who enjoyed gardening, painting, and reading mystery novels. They had met 8 years earlier through mutual friends and quickly bonded over their love for hiking and late-night coffee shop talks. After 3 years of dating, they got married in a small but elegant ceremony, with Ethan's best friend, Darren Miles, standing proudly by his side as best man. Darren had been Ethan's closest friend since college. They had studied engineering together, shared apartments, and supported each other through breakups, job changes, and personal failures. Even after college, their bond remained strong. Darren lived only a few minutes away and was often around the house, helping with yard work, sharing beers during game nights, and occasionally dog-sitting their golden retriever Milo. Ethan had no siblings, so Darren had become the brother he never had. The three of them, Ethan, Laura, and Darren, shared many dinners, birthdays, and holidays. The dynamic felt natural, unforced. Ethan never once questioned the closeness between Darren and Laura. In his eyes, it was just the product of a long-standing friendship. In early 2021, an opportunity arose that could change Ethan's career forever. A multinational construction firm offered him a 3-year contract to manage a major infrastructure project in Dubai. The salary was triple what he earned in Ohio, and the experience would open doors he'd only dreamed of. It wasn't an easy decision. The job required him to relocate, meaning he'd be away from home for extended periods. He worried about the strain it might place on his marriage. But when he brought it up with Laura, she was surprisingly supportive. She said it would be tough, but they were strong enough to handle the distance. She didn't want to uproot her life, especially since her elderly mother relied on her and she loved her job too much to walk away from it. They agreed Ethan would travel alone, visit home whenever he could, and stay connected through regular calls and messages. Before he left, Ethan made careful arrangements. He ensured Laura had everything she needed: updated bank accounts, legal documents, and emergency contacts. He left Darren as a point of support in case anything happened while he was gone. Darren agreed without hesitation, promising to check in on Laura regularly. Ethan felt grateful. He believed he was leaving his wife in good hands. The night before his flight, Ethan and Laura had dinner together, exchanged gifts, and promised that their love would remain strong, no matter the miles between them. He boarded the plane the next morning with a full heart and complete trust. It would be 3 years before he discovered how wrong he had been. The first few months of Ethan's new life in Dubai were a blur of long workdays, late-night meetings, and adjusting to a different culture. His new role was demanding, and the pressure to perform was immense. Still, he made it a point to stay connected with Laura. They scheduled regular video calls, often late at night or early in the morning due to the time difference. In those early days, her smile gave him comfort. She told him about her students, updates on her mother's health, and little details from home that helped him feel less distant. Though tired, Ethan always made time for these conversations. They were his tether to normalcy. But as the first year passed, things began to change. Subtly at first, their calls became shorter. Laura started missing scheduled chats, often with vague excuses about late meetings or errands. When they did talk, she seemed distracted, sometimes even irritated by small things. Ethan chalked it up to the stress of managing life alone. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who questioned everything. He trusted her. After all, they had agreed this was a sacrifice for their future, and sacrifices were rarely easy. Meanwhile, Darren occasionally checked in with Ethan. Their conversations were friendly but less frequent than before. When Ethan asked how things were back home, Darren always kept it simple. "All good here," he'd say. "Laura's holding up." There were no red flags, nothing obvious that would raise suspicion. Still, something about Laura's tone started to bother Ethan. It was as if the warmth they once shared had cooled to politeness. Her messages were short, often just one-liners or emojis. Photos from home became rare. Her once busy social media accounts went quiet. She stopped posting pictures of their dog, of the garden she loved, or of dinners with friends. When Ethan asked why, she said she just didn't have the energy anymore. Then there was the time Ethan tried to surprise her. It was their wedding anniversary, and he had a short break in his work schedule. He booked a last-minute flight home, imagining a sweet reunion. But when he told Laura, her response was hesitant. She claimed she had the flu and didn't want him to risk getting sick after such a long journey. He could hear the unease in her voice. Though disappointed, Ethan respected her wishes and canceled the trip. He told himself she was probably just overwhelmed. It wasn't worth making a scene over what could be nothing. Still, doubts began creeping in. He started noticing little things he hadn't before. When they did video call, Laura was often in a different room, not their bedroom or kitchen. Once, she quickly ended a call after a strange noise in the background. Ethan brushed it off but filed it in the back of his mind. He didn't want to be paranoid. He reminded himself that long-distance relationships were hard, and they had promised to be patient with each other. But behind Laura's silences and excuses, something far more deliberate was beginning to unfold, something Ethan could never have imagined. When Ethan finally returned to Ohio in early 2024, it was meant to be a fresh start. After 3 years abroad, he was eager to settle back into the life he had worked so hard to build. He stepped into his home expecting warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of being with Laura again. Instead, he was met with an odd sense of distance. The house looked the same, clean, orderly, almost too perfect. But something was missing. It felt less like a home and more like a well-maintained model on display. Laura greeted him with a strained smile and an awkward hug. There was no excitement in her eyes, no rush of affection. She said she was just tired, that it would take time to get used to him being around again. Ethan tried to understand. After all, 3 years apart was a long time. But in the weeks that followed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding on someone else's life. There were small changes everywhere. New furniture in the guest room, extra sets of keys hanging by the door, his favorite coffee mug replaced with a plain one. The dog, Milo, barely reacted to him, as if he were a stranger. Laura's behavior was even more unsettling. She kept busy, avoided long conversations, and often made excuses to be out of the house. She was constantly on her phone, quick to hide the screen when he entered the room. Every explanation felt rehearsed. Every moment together felt forced. The real shift came when Ethan ran into a former neighbor while taking Milo for a walk. They exchanged the usual greetings. But then came the offhand comment that changed everything. "Darren must have been a huge help while you were gone. His car was here all the time." Ethan smiled politely and nodded, but inside, his mind froze. Darren. He had barely mentioned Darren since he got back, and Laura hadn't brought him up once. The comment replayed in his mind like a warning. That night, Ethan searched for clues. He checked the spare room and found men's cologne in the drawer, one he didn't recognize. There was also a receipt for a restaurant 2 hours away, dated just a month before his return, with 2 meals listed. When he looked through the garage, he found a shoebox tucked behind an old suitcase. Inside were printed hotel invoices, late-night food delivery receipts, and a necklace with a receipt showing Darren's name as the purchaser. Ethan felt a chill creep over him. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was evidence. But he needed more. Something undeniable. He decided to take a calculated risk. He took an old smartphone from a drawer, installed a discreet recording app, and left it in the living room, hidden under the couch cushions, as if forgotten. The phone would pick up any conversations while he was away at errands or walking the dog. A few days later, he retrieved the phone and listened to the recordings. What he heard shattered any remaining doubt. There were voices, Laura's and Darren's, talking, laughing, whispering things that confirmed everything he feared. The betrayal wasn't new. It had been going on for a long time. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Everything he had built, everything he had trusted was falling apart in front of him. Ethan sat in the dim light of his study, replaying the recordings over and over. Each word felt like a blade, cutting deeper into his trust, his marriage, and his past. There was no longer any room for doubt. Laura and Darren had been having an affair. The voices on the recording spoke freely, without guilt or hesitation. They reminisced about the times they spent together, laughed about the risks they took, and even joked about Ethan never suspecting a thing. What struck Ethan the most was the tone. It wasn't apologetic or even secretive. It was casual, comfortable, and intimate. This wasn't a fling. It was a life they had built behind his back. As he continued to dig, Ethan found more evidence. He logged into an old cloud account that had been connected to their shared home devices. In it were security camera backups he had forgotten even existed. Although Laura had disabled the main system, a few files from a year earlier were still there. They showed Darren entering the house late at night and leaving early in the morning, sometimes staying for days. Ethan watched as his best friend walked around the home as if he owned it, feeding Milo, wearing casual clothes, even parking in the driveway. It was no longer just an emotional betrayal. Darren had effectively stepped into Ethan's life while he was gone. Ethan didn't confront them right away. He understood that emotional reactions would only give them control of the situation. Instead, he began preparing carefully. He consulted a lawyer, bringing all the evidence, audio recordings, financial receipts, video footage. The lawyer, stunned by the thoroughness of the deception, advised Ethan to file for divorce quietly. It would give him the advantage and minimize the chance of Laura manipulating the legal process. Laura noticed Ethan becoming colder, more distant, but assumed it was due to their awkward reunion. She continued living as if the affair had gone unnoticed. Darren, too, remained silent. Neither of them suspected that Ethan now knew everything. The betrayal was deep enough to destroy a marriage, but what Ethan discovered next made it far worse. While organizing documents for the divorce filing, Ethan came across financial statements showing joint account withdrawals and new credit cards opened in his name. He noticed large purchases, jewelry, electronics, and hotel bookings, none of which he had authorized. Darren's name appeared on some receipts, but the accounts traced back to Ethan's credit. Laura had been funneling money, using his absence and her control over their shared finances to fund her secret life. Ethan realized this wasn't just about love or lust. It was calculated. Laura had manipulated both men to serve her needs. She used Ethan's career to justify her freedom and used Darren's loyalty to maintain control. When Ethan was abroad, she convinced Darren that Ethan had grown distant. To Ethan, she painted a picture of loneliness and resilience. Everything was a lie. Every message, every visit home, every promise. But Ethan wasn't broken. He was angry, focused, and ready to expose the truth fully. What he didn't know was that uncovering the affair was only the beginning. There was another layer, darker and more twisted, still waiting in the shadows. Just days after the divorce papers were delivered, Darren vanished. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car was found abandoned near a riverbank an hour outside of town, and he hadn't shown up to work or contacted anyone. At first, it looked like he had simply run away, ashamed, humiliated by the exposure of the affair. But the circumstances felt too strange to ignore. The car doors were unlocked, the keys still in the ignition, and his wallet was left on the passenger seat. It didn't feel like someone escaping. It felt like someone running out of options. Ethan kept his distance from Laura, but he paid close attention. She claimed Darren had gone off the grid, saying he couldn't deal with the fallout and didn't want to face the consequences of his choices. Her behavior, however, was calm, almost rehearsed. She was not distressed, not panicked. If anything, she seemed relieved. Something didn't add up. A few weeks later, police were tipped off when a man cleaning out an abandoned storage unit outside of town found a buried laptop hidden beneath insulation in a false wall. The laptop, when investigated, was encrypted, but eventually cracked. It belonged to Darren. Inside were dozens of emails, video recordings, and written notes, some addressed to himself, others left as journal entries. They painted a picture of a man spiraling under pressure, but what stood out was a series of emails from Laura. The messages revealed that Laura had been manipulating Darren long before Ethan returned. She had convinced him to move in secretly for stretches at a time, promising they could eventually start a life together without Ethan. But she also used threats. Subtle at first, then direct. She warned him that if he ever spoke about the affair or caused trouble, she would accuse him of harassment or worse. One message contained a photo of a forged restraining order she claimed she would file if he didn't cooperate. Another email referenced financial documents, accounts in Darren's name that he had no knowledge of. Darren had been blackmailed. Laura had opened credit cards and bank accounts in his name, using Ethan's money and forged documents to make Darren look complicit. She had cornered him, used his fear and guilt to maintain control. It was clear she had no intention of starting a new life with him, only of keeping him quiet while she took what she could from both men. Police reopened the case around Darren's disappearance. Several weeks later, he was found alive in a remote cabin deep in the woods of West Virginia. He was thin, exhausted, and emotionally broken, but alive. He told investigators everything, confirming the contents of the laptop and providing more evidence of Laura's fraud, coercion, and financial manipulation. Laura was arrested and charged with identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Her web of lies had finally unraveled. Ethan watched it all unfold with quiet resolve. He had lost his marriage, his best friend, and 3 years of his life to lies, but he had reclaimed his future. The truth had come at a cost, but now at last he was free.